to start your recording.
It's going.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for making yourself available or attending at the start of a long weekend. It gives me pleasure to introduce Adrian Reynolds this morning, who's going to talk to us on his experiences in British Columbia. Just by way of background, after graduating from Rhodes University with an MSc in geology in 1979, Adrian started off in oil exploration with Sucor. He then joined Adjib Coal in the Highveld coalfields before moving on to Gencor at St. Helena and the OFS Goldfields. He joined Rand Mines in 1985 and had a stellar career in the company. Survived 2 retrenchments during the unbundling phase, becoming part of Rand Gold Exploration, and then subsequently Rand Gold Resources, where they sort of recreated the company in West Africa. And at Rand Gold, he was part of the executive team that developed the successful company strategy and was responsible for the feasibility studies on the successful Murillo, Lulu, and Tongon mines, which effectively created Rand Gold Resources. Semi-retiring, and he says that in inverted commas, from Rand Gold 10 years ago. He has served on the boards of several listed companies and is currently on the board of Makango, which is a rare earth exploration project in Malawi, and on the board of GT Gold, which you're going to hear more about this morning. And then he's also involved in the relook at Consmerch, which he talked about previously, and maybe we'll get him to do an update one of these days. Thanks, Adrian, and over to you.
Thanks, John. Good morning, all. Okay, so I'd like to talk about porphyry-hosted deposits in British Columbia, Canada. I think you probably all know where it is. It's top left-hand part of North America. Vancouver sits down here, Alaska is up here, and it's this long chain going up in this direction. Looking at the world distribution of these large porphyry gold deposits, they're mainly in the west to east subduction zones of the Americas. So down all along South America here, the really big ones in Chile, Peru, going up through Central America, the northern part of Mexico, then through the western parts of the US, Arizona, and so on north into Canada. Just to put it in perspective, British Columbian copper production in 2019 was 300,000 tons, which is more than half of the Canadian production of 545,000 tons. Seems like a lot, but in perspective, world production was 20 million tons of copper. So while it's small bearing compared to the rest of the world, for British Columbia and Canada, it's very important. $3.5 billion Canadian in exports from Canada. So it's something that both Canada looks after very carefully, as does the BC government. And this is part of that sort of proof. They have an interactive porphyry map that you can access on the British Columbian local government website. If you look here, this is the link to it. And it brings up a page, click on it, and it downloads data to Google Earth. And you can then ask for different things, look at different things, look at the different layers. And I'll just show you some of those. For instance, that's just the geology of the British Columbian area. And each of these terrains, these are these different terrains over here. And there's information about them if you click deeper in these tabs. So producers past and present plus development projects in British Columbia. As you can see, there's a huge amount of them. And any one of those, if you click on it, will give you its name, any alternative names, the resource tons, the resource grade, the content of gold, copper. There is molybdenum in some of these, and there's always silver, which is more of a nuisance than anything else, and also latitude, longitude information. So it's very impressive. but it came home to me that even these really organized governments and geological surveys, they lose the plot after a while. The latest update they did was 2015. So going back 5 years, it's pretty good information, but nothing that's happened in the last 5 years has been updated. It's quite sad in a way that even such a good system falls flat eventually, lack of interest or lack of money. Looking at those producers, the porphyry copper producers in 2015, the names, and as I said before, click on them and then it gives you a whole bunch of information. And we'll come back to red Chris a little bit later. What I thought we would do is just briefly go through these different deposits, just to give you a feeling for particularly the scale and the outlook and how they actually operate. So Copper Mountain, 75% owned by Copper Mountain Corp, 25% by Mitsubishi, the Japanese metals conglomerate, I guess you would call them. It's copper gold, conventional open pit, strip ratio of less than 1.7, and they've put 40,000 tons per day through the plant, crush, grind, and float. Most of these operations are flotation only. They don't go to refinery. So they float, and then the concentrates are then trucked, railed, or shipped to refineries, quite a lot of them in the Far East, Japan and China. Expected life of mine here is 31 years based on the 45,000 tons per day. They're looking at an expansion to 65,000. Production in 2020 was 77.6 million pounds of copper. I apologize for all the different units, but a lot of North America is still working on the imperial system. So you'll see pounds of copper. It's normally, if they talk about tons, it's short tons. So 2,000 times that, 77.6 divided by 2,000 would give you the number of short tons of copper. So really, really big. Expecting to get a little bit more this month, almost 100 this year, almost 100 million pounds of copper. The grade is low. It's less than 0.1 gram a ton. So it's very much a small byproduct. Highland Valley Copper, 100% owned by Teck. 2021 production, they're anticipating 130 odd thousand tons of copper. They have reserves of 402 million tons at 0.3%. And just to give you an idea of the scale, there's the tailings dam there. Look at the height of the wall of the valley fill. It's absolutely enormous. The right-hand slide here shows part of the open pit, plant here, and these three very nice looking coverings, which I guess are stockpiles sitting inside there being protected from the weather. And you can see regrassing of, I presume, old waste dumps. Mount Milligan, this has been going for a while. One of the famous ones, Centera Resources, have reserves of 959 million pounds of copper, 0.22%, 2.4 million ounces of gold at 0.39 grams a ton of gold. And it's a 60,000 tons per day open pit. You know, we look at those kind of grades and we think, how can they do it? And yeah, it's just the economy of scale and efficiencies. And the one thing I will say about these deposits, they're in very pretty areas. The mines themselves might be a little bit sort of ugly, but the surrounding areas are often superb. Coming back to the Red Chris mine, this is an interesting one. It was owned by Imperial Metals, and not long ago, Newcrest bought into it, 70% of it. And it's a reasonable size one, 300 odd million tons, 0.36% copper and 0.275 gold. Produced 36,000 tons of copper in 2020 and 56,000 ounces of gold. The Huckleberry Mine, this has been on care and maintenance since 2016. They're currently drilling for underground extensions. I show this because it's one of these typical Canadian marketing techniques they use. There's the old Huckleberry open pit. That was the extent of the drilling. This is where they plan to drill to. And they do the comparison with Red Chris, where they show what Red Chris looked like in terms of the open pit drilling and what Red Chris is looking like now. So the inference is obvious. We expect to get this kind of down dip extension over here. The new Afton mine, it's called New Afton because New Gold bought it or took it over from Teck. Teck had run the Afton open pit for 20 years up till 97 and then stopped. New Gold got involved in it from 2012 with a block cave, and it's one of the few block caves that's running at the moment. There are a lot more going to come because as the open pits work out, there's still a lot of copper and gold there, and the block cave just brings the economy of scale into it. So in terms of reserves, New Afton's got 757 million pounds of copper. Resources, there are additional billion pounds of copper. So it's quite something. Production 2020 was 64,000 ounces gold, 72 million pounds of copper. And you can see the extent of underground development. Vent raises, declines, and then 3 separate zones, which are going to mine in separate lifts as time goes on. I've probably given you enough numbers now. The drilling density is something you do need to look at. That's the drilling density they had to put into New Afton before they believed they had a resource, a reserve they could count on, and obviously to actually plan the bulk mining underground. I've got one other slide at Red Chris. This came in 2 days ago. Newcrest didn't publish the Imperial Metals estimate of resources and reserves. They felt they had to make the thing more compliant with the Canadian laws. So 2 days ago, they announced a new resource, 980 million tons at 0.41 grams a ton gold and 0.38% copper. So a total of 13 million ounces of contained gold. So it's not a small gold mine. And 3.7, I think that's billion tons of contained copper. No, 3.7 million tons, sorry. Divided 1/3 open pit and 2/3 underground. So really substantial. And that brings me to GT Gold. I'm going to look at a case study of the Toga property. It's owned by the junior exploration company GT Gold, which I joined about 18 months ago. It's in the Stikine region of British Columbia, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange at the end of 2016. At that point, no drilling had been done. There'd been some preliminary work done by others, including Clinton Smythe, who some of you might remember from Anglo American some years ago. And it was mainly rock and soil sampling in the 2013 to 2014 area, but it got some people interested. They formed a private company, and eventually that listed itself as, the company was called Newcrest because it was very close to Red Chris, and then changed its name to GT Gold. So it's situated in the Stikine area in what the promoters love to call the Golden Triangle. It's 475 square kilometers. It's 20 kilometers to the Red Chris mine. It's just off paved Highway 37. It's directly adjacent to the provincial power grid, and it's very close to the shipping port here of Stewart, because again, concentrate's going to be produced, taken down to the port, and then exported from there. The reason this area seems to have been missed in the past, despite all the activity around it, because there's a fair amount of glacial cover, and I don't know, there weren't that many outcrops. It's difficult to understand because when the work was done by Clinton and others, it popped out pretty easily. Just looking in detail at the Golden Triangle. So the Toga project is at top right hand. Red Chris is just here. And what was very interesting to me, 1992, when Randgold, well, in fact, it was in Rand Mines, just before Rand Mines broke up, I was sent off with Mark Bristow to look at 20 odd prospects from the north of BC to middle of Mexico to see if they would suit Rand Mines, and in particular Barlow Rand. And the two projects we visited here was this Spectrum deposit, probably 10 kilometers away from Toga, and the snip in this area here, which is a small high-grade underground epithermal. So it was hell of interesting to get involved in this company after all this time. I'm pleased to say that when we looked at Spectrum, we said it wasn't going to work. There was too much against it. And I guess I'm pleased to say that we weren't wrong. It didn't work. So a short history of GT Gold and you know, what people like to call greenfields value creation. We opened on the market at the end of 2016. 2017, we discovered the Saddle South deposit, which is an epithermal, high-grade epithermal, and I'll discuss it briefly later on. But 2018 was the big one, which was discovering the porphyry at Saddle North. 2019, we went through the infill and expansion drilling, which then led into the initial mineral resource, which we announced in the middle of last year. We've been on track since then to put together the preliminary economic assessment, and it was due out the end of Q1 this year. More about that later. Just climate, just out of interest, it's what they call the Northern Temperate Zone. I'm not sure I'd call it temperate at all, but wintertime, lower to the middle -20s. Fieldwork will start at the lower elevations in about June, upper elevations July, and start tailing off September into October. A lot of precipitation, 100 centimeters, 1,000 mils of combined rain and snowfall, which can be very heavy in winter. Just draw your attention to the drilling platform here. Drilling is expensive in these terrains. There's no messing around, and the drillers have got to be extremely professional, and the carpenters have got to be very, very good and with a head for heights. One of the complications in exploration in Canada is, I think most of you know, that there's this claim system where anybody and his dog can go off into the bush, put 4 pegs in, take the survey coordinates back to the Geological Survey and claim that as exploration for himself. So it can be very complicated for bigger companies. Toga itself consists of 105 contiguous claims, 31,000 hectares. It can be, I guess, a real pain in the arse to get it going. As I said, Red Chris Mine just down here. Here's the main highway going up to the north. Iskut is the nearest settlement, which is mainly an indigenous settlement, and accommodation at Beer Paw Lodge over here. Just back to how you get mining in BC. It's not simple, but there are rules, and the rules are well set out. There's a flow sheet that takes you through the whole process. There's different stages you need approval for. There's different reports, and there's reclamation bonds or reclamation security that you have to put up to the BC Geological Survey, which makes sure that you do the rehabilitation at the end of exploration if you walk away at that stage, and at the end of production if you walk away at that stage. But the rule is set. You just follow the rule and it's okay. It can be very, very slow. And one of the reasons for the slowness is while you might have a claim, you might have the mineral rights, you might have a exploration or exploitation right, whatever you want to call it, the local indigenous people, the First Nations, In this area, the Taltan tribe, they have rights that have been enshrined in law for a long time by the British when they originally came across, and by the subsequent provincial governments. The high courts have ruled that the indigenous people have got rights that are not, dominated by whatever mineral rights you have. So you have to reach an agreement with the local people. In general, they are welcoming for investment. There are some of them that feel that investment is going to change social structures, which, as we know, it does. And it's quite a long process. And it's a process that companies are well advised to do themselves and not rely on the government to do for them. The state very much wants you to do it yourself, reach an understanding with all members of the communities, not just the chief you talk to. And obviously, money gets put into the community from a very early stage, and all of the environmental work is done right from the beginning. And you do things like, it isn't this helicopter, but the company used to use a helicopter to take staff from Bearpaw Lodge to the drilling site, more or less on a daily basis, until they established a site there. And the local population complained about the noise of the helicopter. You know, this is real bush. There is no noise there. Occasionally a car goes past and the helicopters they felt were noisy. So the company rerouted the helicopter flight plan, which was a simple way of doing it, cost a bit extra, but took a lot of noise out of the environment and pleased a lot of local people. Geology, won't talk too much about it. Within the Northern Cordillera, the rocks probably go back 1.8 billion years. The skiing terrain consists of 5 volcanic arcs, mid-Paleozoic to mid-Mesozoic, and the property itself is underlain by at least 3 of these volcanic and volcanogenic sedimentary rocks that are found in the terrain. Very quickly on porphyries, I think the point I make is just important to understand that porphyries are zoned. They're zoned both mineralogically, metallurgically, and important for us in terms of alteration. So you have these concentric sort of zones, and what you're looking for, certainly in our area, was the areas of better or higher potassic alteration. That's going to give us the better grades we felt. So just a bit of the exploration that was done. This area here is the Saddle North area. This is the main porphyry. There's approximately 40 odd holes drilled in there to date. The Saddle South area over here with all this geochem, that was the one where we first discovered a deposit. That's gold epithermals. Talk a little bit more about that later. And there's several other targets that we still have to get to. There's a seriously big one over here, and there's the extension of the geophysics down in this direction. The rocks are, well, they're porphyries, diorites to Monza diorites, a lot of quartz veining through it, quartz, pyrite, chalcopyrite, magnetite A veins, which tend to cross-cut the earlier magnetite veins. The grades in them, this particular section, 2.5 grams a ton, 0.8% copper. So a reasonably high grade intersection for this sort of bulk mining opportunity. So the guys did a pretty good job. The geology was not just slapdash, go in and drill it and see what the grades are. They defined different lithology models, defined different alteration models based on geochemistry, based on visual, based on, well, everything they could throw at it, just about, which led to a very broad definition of the different porphyries, P1, P2, P3, P4, and then I1 and I2, which are later intrusive events, which probably not 100% understood now. And they're not pervasive going, this is a section, so they're not pervasive necessarily going into the screen. And the importance of this, when you build your potassic alteration model, this is what it looks like with the higher, strong potassic alteration in the reds, and then getting weaker as you go out. And compared with the gold grades, where gold grade 1 gram a ton greater than 1 gram a ton is yellow. And in fact, anything above 0.5 gram a ton, cyan, green, yellow, orange, and red. So you can see very clearly the higher grades are associated with the stronger potassic alteration. And it's the same story when it comes to copper. Higher grades of copper, higher potassic alteration. You might have noticed this very straight line down the boundary here, what's called the pulsar fault. And it's an interesting one, and one that's going to take a bit of time to unravel. There's no copper mineralization to the right of this line. You see here some drill holes have gone through the fault, and they contain some gold grades. We suspect those gold grades are the later epithermal event, which happened down at Saddle South. And as I say, none of the copper porphyry mineralization is on the right hand of that. And there is a thought that we've got half a porphyry copper deposit here, and the other half was faulted, and well, who knows where it is now. I'm not sure about that, because if you look at the gold grades, it looks symmetrical. But anyway, that's something for the future. Okay, so all of this came together into, as I say, the preliminary resource. Now, we could not call it potentially mineable. We could not call it a reserve or anything like that, because it's still at an earlier stage, and the Canadians are very strict about this. So on the right here, you'll see an open pit resource shell that we put on that, and an underground mining shape on that. Something I'll point out here, something that I'm still struggling to get used to, is that the cutoff grade, instead of being a gram per ton or a percentage, is what they call a net smelter return. So you'll see here the underground shape was defined by a net smelter return of $16 per ton. So that black outline is where the $16 a ton net smelter return came from. It's because you've got copper and gold, so you have to take it through the process, say at the end of it, well, how much would we get for that ton of rock when we've taken the gold and the copper out of it, and we've gone right through the process. So a bit of getting used to, but anyway. So, sorry, beg your pardon. In the indicated category, our number was just less than 300 million tons at 0.28% copper and 0.36 grams per ton gold. A little bit of silver in there, which is almost irrelevant. The inferred resource, 542.8 million tons, 0.25 copper, 0.31 gold. And being Canadian, I think most jurisdictions now, you can never accept in your mind join those two together. In terms of contained metal, 1.8 billion tons copper in indicated, almost 2.5 million ounces gold, just less than 3 billion pounds of copper inferred, and 5.46 million ounces of gold. So again, a significant gold mine and a very big copper mine. All right, so that takes us up to, I think we did this in about the middle of last year. And you know, the question is, what does that sort of thing do to your coal price, your stock price from the beginning? So from listing at, I think it was 0.45 Canadian dollars, 45 cents when it listed, things were pretty much up and down. Towards middle of 2018, with the discovery of Saddle South, we had a huge spike and everyone got very, very excited. but some of the follow-up drill results weren't as good. And we had this drop of the share price. And then, typical to all Canadian juniors, ups and downs from there on. This initial bump here was the Saddle North discovery, which people really weren't sure of because they, some good values, some bad values, and just not enough substance. But as the gold price went up and the copper price recovered, and people started working out there is something here, we came up very, very nicely. But being a Canadian junior, there's all sorts of things going on, which I really can't speak about here. And ups and downs, and there was market manipulation, there was this and that and the other. But anyway, we got on a really good run from here on, as I think people really realized there was something important here. I just point out, the stock is owned 14.9% by Newmont and just under 12% by directors and management, probably 10% of that by one of the founder directors, the chairman. But Newmont had originally bought in for 9.9%. When we did a further rights issue, they then put in for another 5%. So I think part of this rise is people realizing that Newmont felt this was a serious deposit, and they were going to get involved. And then next step was Newmont made an announcement on March the 10th that they were going to acquire the whole of GT Gold for $3.25 a share, which valued the company at 456 million Canadian dollars, which was a good premium, 38% to the 20-day average, which was a reasonably high premium. I think it was something like 20% to the previous day. So a good success for the shareholders. In total, since 2016, approximately 50 million Canadian was raised to do the exploration, set up the whole corporate business. So that's 50 odd million into the company. And the return was, 9 times that, 450 million. So pretty good. Unfortunately, I've now lost my job with them, or I will have in 6 weeks' time. And the saddest thing is I never got to go there because of COVID. And it was somewhere I'd like to have visited, but I guess that's life in geology and the current world. Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks very much for attending, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Adrian. That was excellent, and another good success story for a Canadian junior, and the system really does work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And maybe just to start the discussion, going a little bit of background, just going back to how long did it take you, plus minus, to actually put the claims together to hold the area that you then wanted to explore?
John, I can't give you a good answer for that. It was before my time, but it basically came as a package at the start of GT Gold. I think the major investor who got involved there, he wanted to see that done. There were still a few bits and pieces, but it was put together. There was a royalty owing to one of the claims holders. Half of that was bought out. The other next half will be bought out. It can take a year or two because you run into some people who are really obstinate, but it's how you get the best out of your investment. Guys did take the original risk there.
But again, Adrian, you talk a year or two, when you look at South Africa here and, little junior companies that are trying to do some of the alluvial diamond work are waiting 4 years for a license. I mean, it's just ludicrous. And fascinating too, and I don't want to hog the floor, but, you went from 2016 to 2021, 5 years. You did a huge amount of drilling and obviously all the other support work in a very, demanding environment. And, you effectively proved the mine and sold it. Fantastic. Well done.
Yeah, look, it wasn't as quick as I expected, I must admit. I thought I was joining for a 5-year sort of spell, but it's unusual, you know, and I think we've made the point of it in a couple of presentations that it's quite often the third or the fourth company that does the drilling that finds the deposit. You quite often need that that background history, and you know, just to add onto the Canadian system, when you go and you take out these claims and you do exploration, and you walk away, you have to return that data. All your drill hole results, your geochem, whatever, then goes back into the survey, and the next person that can come along can look on an open file. It doesn't have to pay money, doesn't have to take anyone for lunch. Can say, if you've got anything on the Stikine area, these coordinates, and the guys will go and have a look for you and say, yeah, look, this company drilled, this company did geochem, and you know, it's the base that you need to work on. I think that one of the problems in South Africa that we've discussed before is that all that old history is either lost or hidden somewhere in the files, or is with our council here, and it's very difficult to get it out.
Yeah, Adrian, say no more.
Yeah.
Anyway, questions?
I was very interested to hear about Clinton Smythe. I worked with him in Anglo in the 80s, and then very, very bright guy. Wow, he was. He did all our resource estimates, and you know, a very, very bright guy.
Yeah,
Is he in Canada now?
I mean, he was a bit of a terrier too. I mean, he sort of kept snipping away at things and got the job done.
Yeah. No, very bright guy.
I remember exchanging some emails with him years ago when he was in Canada, talking about pattern recognition and fractals, and he was talking about it. It was way above my head, but yeah, good guy.
When I went up to Joburg in Anglo, he'd just come from London, and he did a MSc or a doctorate in artificial intelligence, and that was in about 1980, 85.
Right.
Yeah.
95.
And another good export, Graham.
Yeah.
Adrian, in your opinion, as you said earlier, that 5-year lag in data on the Google Earth map, you know, it's concerned, as you say, that an advanced country like that can fall behind. What would be the main reasons for them? Is it a government kept one, or you know, or is it funding? Or what lies behind it being so far? And are they going to catch up, or is this going to be like a lag now?
I don't know, to be honest. You know, these things always do tend to go in cycles. Somebody gets keen, somebody puts it together, there's money available, there's a need. And I guess people use the data, for instance, find Toga, and then sort of say, oh, well, we've got enough at the moment, we can relax. And yeah, I don't know, Henny. I've asked my associates in Vancouver, and they now shake their heads and say, well, you know, management changed and this guy left, it was his baby. And I'm afraid with a lot of these sort of data systems, you get somebody who's passionate about it, who understands how to do it and does it. And then he leaves for another job, she leaves for another job. And then, you know, there's a hiatus until the next very keen person comes along. And, you know, I found this on the mines I've worked on as well. You know, you employ a new geologist, he comes in and he brings in the latest big thing in for instance, software. You know, he brings in data miner, he brings in microminer, he brings in Leapfrog or whatever, and persuades everyone that this is the thing to do. And while he's there, everything's fantastic. And then he leaves and everybody else goes, we'll go back to using Lotus spreadsheets for whatever we wanted to do. And yeah.
Do you have a handle on the average depth of mining in Canada in these gold deposits?
No, that one's going to go down. That one's going to go down 700-800 meters.
And is that open pit and underground, or open pit?
The block caving one looked almost 2 kilometers.
It can go down 2 kilometers, yeah. I think the bottom of that deposit is at about 800-900 at the moment. So the open pit will go down probably 200 or 300 meters. And while the open pit is going down, twin declines will come down branch off there, develop the two different lifts, and then the underground mining sort of does that. But you know, those were our plans. What Newmont will do might be different. So I can't really predict. They have a different way of looking at things, perhaps.
Yeah. And just a question before other people ask, it just costs to run those open pits, round figure, Adrian? I mean, through the plant, you must have a general figure in your head.
I don't really, John, to be honest. I can look it up for you, but I don't retain that kind of thing. Less than $2 a ton for ore, and plant about $8, $9 a ton, something like that. Yeah. And G&A probably $3 to $4. But again, the plant goes as far as concentrate. It doesn't go to ingots of copper.
No, I was going to say about $12. It was interesting you were referring to that smelter return of 16 for your underground modeling.
Yeah.
How labor intensive is it there in terms of mechanization at that depth?
Very intensive. Yeah. There's nobody standing under a block cave or more of the drives. I've actually got somewhere I've got a video for I think it's the new Afton Mine, which shows you how you're going to do it. I'll have a look for it and I'll send it through to you. You might want to share with the group. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, great.
Pretty interesting.
Bello, you got some questions?
Yeah, a quick one, Adrian. You mentioned the issue of economic of scale. How does it perform versus social and environmental requirements in the areas that you have worked in?
If the question is how important is it, how important is the social side of it? It's particularly in Canada, as I said, it's very important. If you don't look after the people, things can get very ugly. You know, the indigenous people there have a culture, a way of looking at things that we don't see sometimes. You know, I think the example I could give you is when you look at Canada and the whole of the Americas, we believe it was populated by people that came across from Siberia 10,000 to 15,000 years ago, an ice bridge across the Bering Strait or something like that. And that's how that area was populated. So, you know, there has been the attitude in the past saying, these aren't indigenous people, they're somebody who've come from Siberia. Now, the local, and whether that makes a difference or not, it doesn't matter, but the local people, a lot of them have beliefs that are very different from that. And you know, one of the beliefs is that the founder of a particular tribe, he was landed in British Columbia on the back of a turtle. And, you know, people start laughing at that sort of thing, or we Westerners start laughing at that sort of thing. But, you know, a lot of Westerners also believe in the story of Adam and Eve, and it's not that different from some of the beliefs that you have in Canada. So, sorry, I'm being long-winded about this, but the social aspect, the amount of money that goes into it, both at the exploration phase and the whole way through, takes away from the economic return, but doesn't really, because if that money isn't put in, and it's not just money, it's involvement, it's talking to people, it's what John's brother was famous for, is that partnership with the local people, the local providers, the local labor, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if that's answered your question, but yeah, it's not just economic rent that drives the companies or is the important part. I've found dealing with these big companies, and I was with another one previously, there's whole departments that we don't even, or we haven't in the past thought about. One of the companies had a human rights manager. His job was to look after human rights. So whatever the rest of us thought about a particular area or particular people there, he would say, okay, you know, the government rules are A, B, and C, But the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights says something different. And we as a company are going to follow what the United Nations say. It takes more time, it takes more money, it takes more attention, but it's modern business, modern mining has got to follow that that way of doing things.
Adrian, the Canadians are very good at it as well too. I mean, they're quite proactive about it. We tend to sort of laugh at them and think they're softies, but I must say it was like when they found Akati, the gold mine in the Northwest Territories. I mean, they sent people all over the world to look at, how best to work with the indigenous people and involve them in the process.
Yeah. There were cases probably about 20 years ago that got really nasty with blockades, not just of mines, but other businesses that were ignoring local communities and not treating them. So there was a little bit of a stick there as well as the carrot, no doubt about that.
And I guess that the positive thing there, it comes with the territory. You don't sort of do it because you're forced to do it. I mean, it's very much part of your exploration and mine development. So you go in there knowing that you're going to work with partners who know the local environment.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Cabello, do you want some? Yeah.
I just want to make a quick follow-up. How do you factor those social and environmental issues into your MPV?
I wish I could give you a good answer to that, and I'm afraid I really can't. It's almost one of those, let's call it benefits that can't be quantified. It's very difficult. Well, it's very easy to say if trouble really hits and you're blockaded, how much production you lose and how much revenue you lose. But to actually put it in from the beginning, it's difficult. Look, I think most people have got to the realization now that it's the right thing to do, just because it's the right thing to do as human beings, to not ignore people who are living right next to your source of finance. You're making money out of this thing. The people living next door, they've been there for a long time. The correct human thing to do is to involve them, look after them, talk to them, help them. I mean, that's what we always say. The multiplier effect is one thing, but the local communities have just got to be looked after because, yeah, it's the right thing to do.
Just to put it on a different perspective, Adrian, does it get significant enough, often enough, that you walk away from a project in terms of cost? Or is it just another slice of the pie that you've got to decide? Is it low enough, the ratio, or does it sometimes get to be a deciding factor if it's going to go or not?
I think it depends on your appetite for risk and your. Let's give an example.
I don't have any idea of if it's 10% or whether it actually impacts on the final decision to mine or not. Does it?
No, I don't think it's
to that size.
I don't think it's that easy to quantify what it's going to be. It can be done. I don't think it's a 10% would be that wouldn't be your capital cost. Let's say your operation costs you $500 million to put in. You've got open pit infrastructure, plant. The cost of the social side of that isn't going to be 10% of that. It's probably not even going to be 5% of that. It might be 2%, 3%. It's not a big thing, but it's something that's always been ignored because people don't want to be bothered. I look at the Kibali mine in the DRC. I was not involved with it. I was leaving Randgold at the time it came in. They had a tremendous job to do in reciting infrastructure, local infrastructure that was there. They had, I can't remember the exact figures, but it was something like 15,000 people that had to be recited. There were 20 churches, there were 5 graveyards. It was an enormous amount of work, and it had to be done properly without government coming in and evicting people. But I should imagine of the 500 odd million that it cost to build a mine as such, that might have come to, I don't know, I would take a guess at $15–20 million, but it's not, it's not a showstopper. Let's put it that way.
That's what I just wanted to get off then.
And Henny, just to add there, and Cabello, it'd be interesting to hear your view. I mean, the other thing about it, my experience of all the Canadians and particularly Australian juniors that have come to particularly West Africa and develop projects, and I think that's something, we've got to get past in this country too, where, probably the unfortunate thing is it's legislated. Well, actually, most explorers, as Adrian said, you go there, in Canada, obviously it's slightly different given the weather, but all the juniors I've had experience with, if you go into West Africa, you start employing local people, as the project develops, it's almost sort of a given that you build a clinic and then you start building the schools and you do those sort of things which uplift the community, because you're going to also, use and interact with that community on a daily basis. A lot of those people become your employees, so they need to get medical services, and so it's kind of a natural business process. And I think, as Adrian's implying, if it's managed proactively from the front, it's not really a risk, so to speak. It's an investment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cabela, that answered your questions.
I'm good.
And where are you? What do you do?
I'm a senior project geologist. I'm working for Debswana in Botswana.
For Debswana?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, why don't you send us your details? We'll send you the links to the talks. It'd be great to have you talk sometime as well.
I do have.
Okay, great. All right, other questions?
John's caught another one.
No.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
No, we need to hear about Debswana. It's an important player.
Absolutely.
Right. Questions, guys? No more? Any? Thanks, Adrian. That was excellent. It gives, it's great to have these experiences from other parts of the world, particularly where you've, taken a project from almost grassroots. I mean, obviously you were in a known area, not to detract from your work, but, from grassroots through to evaluation and near development, and well done on getting Newmont to buy it. So hopefully you did at least get some little bonus or walk away present as well.
It's coming.
Okay, so next time you come out this way, you can sponsor the lunch.
Absolutely.
Breakfast.
John, I just want to use this opportunity to ask the local guys to start responding, and the people in the area, as far as Adrian, we are thinking of reinstituting our breakfast talk once a month. We need some reaction to say how available you guys are and what sort of timing we will bring into it. If you can do that, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Adele, don't go away, and you haven't answered my email yet.
I know I haven't.
No? Okay. We need some good women to share their experiences as well.
Okay.
I was worried John was going to say cook breakfast.
You can do that as well. Okay. Good. Thanks, everyone. That was really enjoyable and interesting. Thanks, Adrian. We look forward to more.
Thanks very much, Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure, guys.
Cheers, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Cheers,
Bye now.
everybody. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much.